Wow, David, this thing is great. Isn't this an 84 300D with the 3-liter diesel?
Yeah, it's a little turbo diesel.
Wow, these things are like tanks.
Yeah, these are really cool cars. Yeah, this one actually just came in. We got a lot to do on this car. A lot to do. These are really cool cars. It's been a while since I actually seen one of these. And when they called and wanted some work done on it, I said, bring it on in.
Yeah, it looks great.
Well, let's get started on showing everybody what we've got to do to this thing.
Yeah, let's get started.
Welcome back, guys. Another day to chill with the Wizard in the shop. And like Mrs. Wizard said, this is an 84 Mercedes 300D with the 3-liter turbo diesel in it. These cars are like tanks. This one has 171,000 miles on it, but that's really nothing for these engines or the car, really. There's many of these running around with 400, 500, 600,000 miles. And I think the Mercedes Museum actually has one in Germany that has 1,000,000 miles on it. That was a taxi. The potential for these cars to go and run is really high. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of them left on the road. Some of them are rusted out, or whatever issues did arise, it was too expensive to fix. So versus the value of the car, they just parked them, and there's a lot of them for sale that don't run. This one's a different story. It actually runs and drives. It's the vice versa. It runs and drives, but there's many other issues with the car. The owner of this car inherited this, I think it was from his father, and it's time to get the owner's daughter a car to drive. The daughter really wants Grandpa's old Mercedes. The owner kind of discussed it with me. He says, you know, the money that I would spend to buy my daughter a car, 2, 3, 4, 5 grand, I could spend that money here and she would get the car that she really wants, and we could bring Grandpa's car back from the brink. So this is one of the rare case scenarios where the cost to fix this car is going to be more than it's worth, but yet we're going to do it anyway because there's a really good story behind it. So just like I've on many other projects in the shop, when you come in with request and you have the money backing that request, that's when I give the green light. This is a W123 chassis. They had many different cars. They had 280E, they had 240D, and a 300D, the ones that I'm familiar with. I have worked on a lot of these cars, and I'm very familiar with all of their issues, all the things that can go wrong with them. I've repaired all of them already. I actually used to have an 83 240D, the little 4-cylinder non-turbo. It was only 62 horsepower, 64 horsepower, something like that. It was very slow, and it was an automatic to boot, which made it even slower. The interesting story behind that car is that it was responsible for the connection I made with Tyler Hoover of Hoovie's Garage. Now this is over 10 years ago. It's quite a ways back, but it was in Kansas City, not too far away. I was going to go look at that car, and so was he at the same time. But I got there first, and I purchased it. And I posted my progress of repairs on Peach Park's Mercedes forum, and that caught his attention. He said, hey, you know what? I actually was going to buy that car. I actually just started a small dealership. I need a mechanic. Do you want to work on my cars? And that's where it kind of just blossomed from there. Later down the road, I sold the car. I fixed everything that was wrong with it, and I sold it for a profit. Hoovie wasn't interested at that point, so he never got to have the car, unfortunately. But it's really interesting, the story behind a 123 car that caused a business to boom. It caused a friendship, and we both help each other's channel out, and it's kind of just a really neat thing that happened. We haven't fully inspected this car. It just got here, but just kind of some of the complaints that he has and some of the things that I've seen under the hood, I can tell it's going to be a pretty long project. Let's take a look at what we found. So here we have the venerable 3-liter turbo diesel, the 300D engine. This is an OM617, that's what it's designated by Mercedes. The engine that I had in my little 240D was an OM616. Let's show you some really interesting, kind of scary things that I've found already. These are some main power wires. As you can see, it looks like a mouse has chewed through them. That looks pretty rough right there. It looks like some little gnawing going on there. here. And then I started looking around more. Let me remove this battery and show you some more. That entire harness is sawed clean in half and gone. I guess a mouse must have eaten it or taken it away, or there is almost nothing left of it. That's crazy. And then let's take a look around. There's some more. And here we have some more down here. These ground wires are all chewed up. You can see they chewed on this AC pressure switch wiring here, all chewed up. I live in a rural community, and a shop that I used to work at was also in a rural area. And there was 1 year where the owner where I was working calculated up $20,000 in mouse damage. I fixed a lot of chewed wires. What's going on is that the mice, they like the flavor of the shielding, the plastic coating on the wire, and they just start chewing and they can't stop. They like it like it's Thanksgiving dinner or something. They just keep chewing and chewing and chewing. And if it goes unchecked, as you see here, an entire harness worth of inside the car is made useless.
Does a car have to sit for a really long time for mice to really make damage?
No, they can start chewing a wire here or there in a month or two. They can do a little bit of damage, but what we see here hasn't happened in a few weeks. It's happened probably over the course of a year or more. The mouse will make a nest somewhere in the car, and as it sits longer and longer, the mouse travels around inside the car. He finds different harnesses and chews them up. Then he moves over here and he chews this one up. And pretty soon, like you see, it ends up in an electrical devastation to the car. So let's take a look on this side over here. We can see some wiring that's been chewed and repaired here. And there's some more down here. This is the glow plug controller. We can see a couple of chewed wires there. You can see they chewed down here a little bit on the shielding, the covering over it. Looking around at these vacuum lines, I can see that there's been some damage and they tried to tape it or tried to repair it. Here's a heater hose that's kinked. That's not a properly shaped hose that's supposed to go there. So there's been repairs attempted on this car over the years that may not have been of the best quality, I guess you say. And here we have some more wiring. That's the story with this car so far, is wiring.
Do you have to replace the whole wire, or can you splice them back together?
We're going to do the whole wiring. So like Mrs. Wizard said, she's asking about splicing or repairing versus replacing the harnesses. And I have no issue to repair 5 or even 10 wires. That's not a big deal. But the amount of time that I would spend replacing all of this chewed wiring will be the same amount of time, labor-wise. It's just pulling the whole thing out, throwing it in the garbage, and putting a good used harness in place of it. That way it's clean looking. There's not a bunch of splice joints all over the place. It's not very good when you open the hood and you see 60 splice joints. It doesn't look very good. So this car is going to go to a teenager who wants to enjoy Grandpa's car and not worry about the hassle of the wiring still has issues. There's so many splices that there could be an issue, and I don't want that for the person, and we're just going to replace it. I actually got in contact with Eurasian Bob. He has several of these in different stages of teardown in his yard. He also has a salvage yard. He's going to be able to help me with a lot of parts and pieces on this. I did find, however, on eBay an entire harness from front to back for this entire car, a good used one, for 170 bucks or make offer. I said, what the heck? I offered the people 100 bucks. They said sold. So I paid, and it's on its way. In the comments section, I've seen some debates going on about why don't you offer used parts to customers, used water pumps, used alternators. And it's for liability. But there are cases where used parts are really the only viable option. You're not going to go to Mercedes-Benz dealerships across America and be able to purchase a complete harness for this car. And the reason why is they're not even made anymore. I suppose if you were Bill Gates, you could pay an electrical engineer to just build you a harness from scratch. It'll probably cost $5 or $10 grand. or some crazy number. It'll be some crazy high number. Even if the used harness I'm buying has a few little tiny issues here or there from age, I can address that and it'll be a lot less of a hassle or a risk than what we've got here. Anything that has moving parts, water pumps, alternators, hydraulic pumps, I don't install those used because it usually ends up in an unhappy customer. I could even tell the customer ahead of time, I can put a used water pump, but there will be no warranty. And they can accept that agreement, but yet in 2 months, if that pump fails just because it was failing when we installed it, before we even installed it, all of a sudden they demand I offer a warranty. I demand that you fix this car because it failed too early. And it's like, no, we discussed that there would be no warranty, and it just creates a huge scene. I don't like to argue or fight with people, especially customers. I want them to be happy with their car. The amount of money they put into the car needs to match what they get out of the repair. And I don't see that being a plus for the customer, putting used alternators and used water pumps. If you have a do-it-yourself mechanic friend or family member and you want to take the risk of a used part, there's where you can save some money, have them put it on for you. You don't have to pay professional shop level of rates. You have your friend put it on. I personally won't be interested in doing that really because, like I said, I like to keep happy customers. And I know from experience, used parts equals unhappy customers, just about every time. Unless I have no choice and they can't even get the parts anymore, then you just have to go with it. Now it'd be an easy argument to say, well, can't you just inspect the parts before you put them in? Sure. I'm going to charge you for that inspection. And it's very likely going to come pretty close to the cost of buying a new pump or a new whatever. And the customer will say, well, I didn't really plan on paying that. And then I say, well, then I'm not doing it. So now we're not inspecting the part because they don't want to pay for it. In most cases, I don't work on cars this old because, again, of the liability. You put a new power steering pump on, the rear wheel bearing goes out. It's going to have something else go wrong because of age. I made an exception with this one because of the story behind it, and I have a real affinity for these cars. I think they're really cool cars. We can get this one back on the road. It's not dented in, it's not rusted out, it's not destroyed, the engine runs great. We can just take it that next few steps and bring it back on the road and be reliable. As you can see, and as you can imagine, most of the electronics in this car are not working, obviously, because they've been all chewed up. It also has an issue that when you turn the key off to turn off the engine doesn't die. You actually have to open the hood and come out and push the manual stop engine. You push the linkage this way to turn the engine off. That's there in case this issue happens, and it's not exactly convenient to do that every time you park your car. I know from experience that's a vacuum leak. It uses vacuum to do a lot of things on this car. The power locks, the turbo actuation, shutting off the engine, there's a lot of vacuum things on this car. And if you get a leak in one of your doors, the power lock actuators, it can affect everything on the car. It won't be able to turn off the car. The turbo's not doing as like it should on the ALDA.
Gosh, Car Wizard, that sounds like the old school daisy chain networks we used to have.
Yeah, it's kind of like where one thing fails, it takes down the whole network. Yes, that basically is the same idea. Let's take a look at the engine some more, some common points with this engine, common failure points or common issues, and then we'll take a look at the interior and the rest of the car. Common issues with these are fuel leaks, vacuum leaks, and oil leaks. One fuel leak common is right here on this nut that holds the fuel filter in. The housing gets warped or whatever and it won't seal anymore, and it leaks fuel out of here and down onto the ground. Also, some of these copper washers here and here can start leaking with age. You can see the primer pump here. That is used to primer the injector pump if you ever change the filter or run out of fuel. And as you can see, it's wet with fuel. Those frequently leak. And here's the fuel filter. Those frequently can cause issues where they get cracked. They can start leaking. This little gray box that you see in front of you actually is the cruise control actuator. On most Mercedes models of these vintage, that is a common issue, not just these 123 chassis. As you can see, it actuates the throttle to set your cruise. This can fail. There's also an electronic module under the dash, the amplifier for it, which can also fail and you lose cruise control. Nobody makes new ones of those. You usually have to go with a used part on those and cross your fingers. This is the injector pump here. We'll give you kind of a quick identification of where everything's at. This is the ALDA, which, based on the injector pump requests, changes some of the settings for the turbo. This is the shutoff here. This actually turns your car off. When you turn off the key, it's supposed to send vacuum into here and shut the injector pump down. The turbo sits directly under this air filter. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, there it is. These aren't a high pressure turbo. They're only like 5-6 psi, somewhere in that range. Just enough to get a little bit more of a kick. These have about 85 horsepower, in that range. So they're not super powerful, but it's a lot better than the 240D that I had. This right here is a monovalve. This is what controls your heater. And they frequently fail on these cars with automatic climate control. It gets either stuck open or closed, one way or the other, and then you have full heat or no heat. Nothing in between. That's a common issue. Usually they sell a rebuild kit. You take these little screws off and replace the electronic portion of that and get it back going again. As you can see, more mouse chewings here on the heater hose. That little mouse was really going to town on this poor car. We're going to have to replace some hoses, that's for sure. Here's some common vacuum leaks. Here's a changeover vacuum valve. When you do the throttle, it actuates valves inside of there. Those are common vacuum leaks. If it's cold weather and you're having a hard time starting these things, the glow plugs, this wiring harness goes, you can see directly below my fingers is a glow plug. There's 5 of them along the cylinder head, bottom of the cylinder head. They're not too hard to get to, they're not too bad. But the harness goes over to here, just like we showed a minute ago, to the glow plug controller. And this metal bar is the fuse. I've frequently seen these where they're broken, it's blown the fuse. You can replace that and get the glow plugs back in operation again. The relays inside of here can also fail and you just have to replace the entire glow plug module. Those are some of the things that you need to check into if your glow plugs are failing. We won't know how we're doing on the glow plugs until we get all this wiring sorted out. It's so much chewed up wiring. With so many issues with this car, what are some of the first things we should start with? Where do you even start when there's so many issues with the car? And that's going to be electrical. With what we see here, it could actually start a fire, it could short circuit, it could cause issues. You don't want to go road testing and trying to adjust and set things up on this car when the electronics aren't even working in the first place. The first step is going to be the wiring harness. We have to get that addressed first. Then we can move on to the vacuum leaks and figure out there's probably going to be more than one. And they're probably going to be in the doors. That's my guess.
How do you find them? Do you use a smoke tester?
You can, yeah. You can use a smoke machine. They tell you where all the leaks are very quickly. So after we get the electronics sorted out, we get the vacuum leaks sorted out, then we go to glow plugs, making sure that everything's working on glow plugs. You can measure resistance on each individual plug and make sure they're good. They're cheap enough in this case, we probably just will replace all 5, just for good measure. Make sure they're operating properly and that it starts the vehicle in cool morning weather smoothly without a bunch of smoke and the engine shaking. This one also probably has a common issue, which is little shock absorbers on either side of the engine for the motor mounts. And they're there to absorb vibrations with the engine, which can make it feel like there's a misfire, but there's not. It's just the little shock absorbers that go by the motor mounts. Then after we get that done, we make sure all the accessories are working, the power windows are working, make sure the AC and the heat is working properly. Make sure there's no massive leaks, the transmission's in good order, it shifts through all the gears smoothly. Check the wheel bearings, the flex disc, all the different things like that before we give it back to the customer and let them enjoy the car, get it back on the road again. Let's take a look at the car, let's take a look around. So as you can see, as you look down the body here, it's not all dented and beat up. It's in decent shape. The paint's a little faded, but that's going to have to go to a paint shop to have that addressed. But I like seeing that there's not a bunch of dents in it. The tires are kind of a little low, and they're probably aged. Once we get it running and going, it's probably going to be a proposal I give to the customer that they need to get all 4 new tires. As you can see through the window, the back bumper is sitting in the back seat. I'm not sure why it's not installed on the vehicle, but we'll have to figure that out as we go. But again, it's not dented or beat up back here. It is faded. See in the tag right there, 2013, September of 2013. It's at least been setting for 7 years, at least. As we look down this side, there is a small scrape here. That's not that big of a deal. That can be addressed at a body shop. But again, it's no huge dents or no huge body issues, which is great. As you can see in this back window, there's the original first aid kit sitting there. Most of these actually still have the original first aid kits, amazingly. You can find these cars that are wrecked or rotted out or don't even run anymore, and they still have their first aid kit. Now, I would keep that for nostalgia, just to show it off. If you get into an accident and you need medical care, don't use that old medical kit. The stuff, the bandages are probably rotten. Any of the ointments and things are probably no good anymore, and it could cause an infection or something, who knows. Use that for nostalgia, don't use it for a real life emergency. It's in decent shape for its age. It's not immaculate. The wood curling on the glove box is common on these. The dash has some small cracks in it, which isn't a huge deal. They make plastic shells that go over those because that's also a common issue. Another common issue is the lights inside of the cluster are so dim. You can replace them with LEDs and it really brightens it back up. I did that on mine that I had. The seats are in decent shape. This is not leather. This is the MB Tex. It's textured vinyl that looks like leather. These cars always have an interesting smell to them, all of these old Mercedes. And it's because inside the seats, the cushioning that they use is actually horsehair. And you smell that smell. It's not a bad smell. It's actually kind of an interesting, kind of a pleasing smell. But if you take a whiff of it, I should say, it smells like horsehair. The headliner is in very good shape. I always like to see a good headliner. But you can see some of the trim. The cloth trim here will have to be fixed in an upholstery shop. It's drooping down. It's not a huge deal, but it definitely needs repaired. So all in all, this thing's actually in pretty decent shape, and it is a very good candidate to go through and fix all the other issues that it has. The fact that it runs and drives, and actually we drove it to where it's at right now, and the brakes work and everything, that's why I took on the job. If it did not run, if there were transmission issues or things, I probably would have turned it down. But the rest I can take care of. It's not that big of a deal. It just takes money. That's the big thing. Whenever you have a job, you're bringing something back from the brink. It's not about the ability of the mechanic. It's not about how long it's going to take. It's about how much money are you going to spend. You need to think about, if you purchase a vehicle like this and say, I'll pay a shop to fix it up for me, it's going to be way higher, double, triple what you think it's going to be. When I first opened my business, I actually had a guy that brought me a Mercedes, and he had budgeted a couple of grand. It ended up being $6,000. He paid it. He got everything was fixed that he wanted. He was happy with that. But he told me, he said, Car Wizard, if I would have known what it was going to cost to get my car to where it's at today, he said, I would have never even called you. And I've had other customers that have had similar situations at other shops, at other mechanics. They say the same thing. If I knew how much it was going to cost, I wouldn't have done the job. So make sure you keep that in mind. When you pick up one of these cars, if you're going to fix it yourself, it's feasible. If you're going to pay a shop, there better be a reason, like it's inherited, it was grandpa's car, it has sentimental value. Otherwise, it's not financially feasible. If you're curious what kind of tools that I have that we're going to probably use on this car, check my Amazon affiliates link below. There's listed all the tools that I have in the shop. We also have merchandise for sale there as well, hats, and actually we have face masks now, Car Wizard face masks. If you haven't hit the subscribe button already, go ahead and do that now. It's been very busy, which means many more cool videos to come. Thanks for watching.